Hi everyone, welcome again to Scriptorum series, and this is Mhando. And today we will explore the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is the third book in the Bible after Genesis and Exodus. And as you can remember where we came from, the book of Genesis, we started with the theme of creation. But going down the line in Genesis chapter 3, we see that mankind fell into sin. They disobeyed God, and then they were cut off from the presence of God. So from then, God started redemption plan, which we saw throughout the book of Exodus, where God orchestrated the redemption plan, starting with this man called Abraham, from whom they came Isaac, and from Isaac came Jacob, and from Jacob came 12 sons, out of which came 12 tribes. And these 12 tribes formed a nation called Israel. And so the book of Leviticus is the continuation of the redemption plan that God started when he entered into a covenant with Abraham, that through him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And this redemption plan, as we saw in the past two lessons, is the plan to restore mankind into their original state with God, into the original state of living in the presence of God, of being one with God. And so the book of Leviticus is basically the nation of Israel in the divine plan of God. The nation of Israel in the redemption plan in which God is redeeming the world through Israel. So let's dive into this book and see what it's all about. So our lesson today is structured into three parts. One part we will explore the background of the book itself, and then the second part we will explore the contents of the book of Leviticus, and then the third section we will see how it applies to our modern lives today, how it's relevant to us who live today. So starting with the background is basically, what is this book about? And answering that question, we will have to go through the word that God spoke to the children of Israel through Moses, which he said in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 45, "I am the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore be holy, because I am holy." So here God is calling the nation of Israel, the children of Israel, to be holy. And the word holy, contrary to what many of us think today, the word holy is more than the rituals, is more than trying to be right. The word holy, it means to be set apart. The word holy means to be separated for the divine purpose. And that separation entails how we relate with God and the things we do in order to be in right standing with God. But the root word in the whole concept of holiness is to be set apart, or to be separated for a specific purpose. So here God is calling the nation of Israel that you are to be separated, you are to be set apart for the purpose that I have for mankind, or for the world, because through you, Israel, I'm going to redeem the whole world. Through you, I am going to restore the nations and the whole world to the original plan, to the plan that I had in the beginning of God being one with mankind and for the heavens to be one with the earth. And the background of the book also includes or tells us that this book is a complete narrative of the call, the call that God has given the children of Israel. So it's not the book of wisdom, like as you read maybe the book of Proverbs, or it's not a poetic book like you read the book of Psalm, or it's not a book of symbolic literature as you read the book of Revelation. Leviticus is the book of narrative, and that's why I am not surprised that many of us, when we read the Bible, every time we reach to the book of Leviticus, it feels like, this book is so dry. Yeah, it's narrative, it is complete narrative about what God wanted out of Israel, or how they were supposed to walk before God in order for them to be set apart for the purpose that God has put for them. So it's the book that tells us various accounts of how God established the systems that the children of Israel were supposed to walk in, how God was establishing the order of how they were supposed to live, so that they can become this peculiar nation which God is going to use to redeem mankind. And now, mind you, that the nation of Israel was chosen by God in this noble and great redemption plan, not because that the Israelites were very special above all other nations or all other human beings. It was simply the grace of God that He chose them. And you will see that when we get to the book of Deuteronomy, there was a point He said that I did not choose you because you were righteous or because of any special qualities that you had. I chose you because I loved you. It was my own will. It was by my own grace that I put you into this plan. So that takes us to second part of the background, and which is what kind of audience that this book was written to, was meant when it was being written. The audience obviously is the Israelites. So understanding the audience of that was intended for the book helps us to understand or to know what the meaning of the phrases and words and things that were being addressed, or we find addressed in the book. Failure to understand this context of the audience, it leaves us with ambiguities when we come to the application, when we want to apply the principles that we find in this book. When we don't have the context, then it becomes difficult to relate and to apply the principles that we find in the book. And so the audience was the people of Israel. And then the third part of the background of the book of Leviticus is that why it matters, why anyone should read this dry book of Leviticus, which talks about how people can sacrifice bulls and goats, and how they are supposed to sprinkle blood on their doorpost, or how they're supposed to weave the word of the Torah on their clothes, and bunch of other things that, when if done today, they will be so weird. But so why should we still read the book of Leviticus? The reason is one: it's still relevant despite that all these things are not being practiced today. But the book of Leviticus helps us to understand, and it gives us a perspective on how we are supposed to relate to God today. And we will see that in detail as we go. Now, we move to the second part of our lesson in the book of Leviticus, and this is the contents. So, the book of Leviticus, it has three main contents. So when you read everything that you find in this book, it revolves around these three things. One, rituals. So the book of Leviticus, as I said before, it's a book of narrative. So it describes a bunch of rituals that the children of Israel are supposed to observe in order to be holy, in order to be set apart, in order for God to live among them, and him living among them, he would reveal himself to the world through them. So you can find all these rituals from the Leviticus chapter 1 to 7, and then from chapter 23 to 27, there you will find the calendars that they were supposed to observe these rituals. And in short, these rituals, because we don't have much time to go in detail of all these rituals, but you can go through them yourself as you read this book. How they were to sacrifice animal, crops, oil sacrifices, and they had different sacrifices, peace offerings, sin and burnt offerings, and also they had rituals of festivals. So they had 7 festivals: festival of the feast of Passover, the feast of Hanukkah, the feast of it goes on and on and on. In total they had 7. And also the second part of the content of this book is it's about priesthood. So as you can remember, when we were studying the book of Exodus, God called the Israelites and he said to them, "You will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." These are the words you were to speak to the Israelites. So this is God telling Moses that the reason that I took you guys out of Egypt, and now I'm creating a nation out of you, is because you are going to be a nation of priests to me. And the word priest simply means a mediator between God and mankind, between the heaven and earth. So the nation of Israel was called out, was made holy, was set apart in order to be a kingdom or a nation of mediators between God and mankind, and between heaven and earth. And so actually that's where we got the name for this book, Leviticus, because the priesthood was given to Aaron, Moses' brother, and his family, and it was an ordinance that was God commanded. It was supposed to be perpetuated throughout their generations. And so Aaron and Moses descended from the tribe of Levi, and Levi was one of the sons of Jacob. So as every son of Jacob, out of every son that Jacob had, came out a tribe. So from Levi came the tribe of Levites, and these Levites, God decided that they're the ones to be the priests. And so the book of Leviticus is it tells us in detail how these priests are to be obtained and how they were supposed to be ordained to enter into this sacred service on behalf of the nation of Israel. So their main purpose was to mediate between God and the nation of Israel, to mediate so that God can dwell among the Israelites. And also we see that uh, in the second part of, the third content of this book of Leviticus. First we had rituals, second we had priesthood, and then the third content that you will find when you read the book of Leviticus, it's laws. And you will find different, actually there are more than 600 laws in the Torah that the Israelites were using to worship God. So they originated from this, and it comes, you can find it from the book between chapter 11 to 20 of the book of Leviticus. And basically the laws were they were of different types. So one type of laws was 10 commandments, and everyone can remember. That is the most popular pact or package of laws, because when we hear 10 commandments, we relate to the movie of Moses delivering Israelites from Egypt. So 10 commandments, it was one of the package of laws that God gave them. And then the second package was the laws about social justice. So because God was creating this nation, and as I said before, in the book of Leviticus, he was creating governing systems for this nation to walk and to relate with him, and also to relate with each other. So these laws of social justice were about Israelites among themselves, a person with their neighbors, and they contained different kind of stuff, like if people steals somebody else's property, how they were supposed to be treated. If a person is found sleeping with another man's wife, well, how they're supposed to be treated. If a person commits a crime, how they are supposed to treat those people. And a third pact of law was the laws about purity. And so you will find when you read the book of Leviticus that people who came into contact with dead bodies, people who came into contact with bodily fluid, they were not supposed to enter into God's presence until they purify themselves. And it doesn't mean that when people experience those things, like for example when they go and bury their relatives of their friends, it means they've touched the dead bodies of they've come near to the dead body, and this means that they have already been defiled, and this disqualified them not to enter into the presence of God. But it doesn't mean that they sinned against God. It only means that they defiled themselves not to enter into the presence of God until they follow certain rituals to sanctify themselves, to cleanse themselves, and then they will become clean to enter into the presence of God. So these are pretty much the contents that you will find as you read the book of Leviticus: rituals, priesthood, and laws. Now, we're turning into our last section of the book of Leviticus, and this is about application or relevance. So, as you remember, I asked the question before, why should we read the book of Leviticus today? And I said that it is still relevant. Now, let's see. When you come across rituals in this book, and then After you read, you might ask yourself, what am I supposed to do with these rituals? Do I need to practice them, or do I need just to learn from them? Now, here's the answer. The book of Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 24, it says, "But Jesus lives forever. He has a permanent priesthood." So, as you remember that as we were beginning this lesson, I said God was calling the nation of Israel to be the kingdom of mediators, to be the nation of priests. And their main purpose was to stand in the gap, or to stand in the middle between God and mankind, between heaven and earth. And so through Israel, God will be revealed to other nations, and he will be revealed to the earth. But here in the book of Hebrews, the Bible says, "But Jesus," so the word "but," it means it negates something that came before that. So it talks about priesthood. So it negates the priesthood that came before Jesus' priesthood. So I don't want to go into much detail about it, because we will learn more as we go. But here, for the sake of application, when Jesus came, he entered into priesthood, and he became a royal priest, and his priesthood fulfilled all the requirements of the law that the Israelites were supposed to observe in order to be in the right position with God. So when Jesus came, he came, and here is one thing to notice. He did not come to abolish or to contradict the law that God gave to the Israelites. As you will read in the book of Leviticus, all those laws, Jesus did not come to contradict them, but he came to fulfill them, because the mission of Israel was to walk with God until the time when Jesus comes, because Jesus descended in the human form from the nation of Israel. So their whole purpose was to walk with God, so that through them God can bring the Messiah. God can bring his son in bodily form, in human form. And after Jesus came, their mission to save the world was over. After that, Jesus took over, and he took over everything, including priesthood. And that's why here we have the verse which says, "But Jesus lives forever. He has permanent priesthood." So when Jesus came, when he assumed this he took the office of priesthood, he took it forever. So when you read about all these rituals in the book of Leviticus, all that you need is to learn. We are no longer obligated to practice these rituals. We are no longer obligated to observe the order of worship that God had put on Israelites to observe. They were put on them in order for them to come to the point that they will bring the Messiah. But after that, Jesus fulfilled all their mission was accomplished, and Jesus took over. So as a person who believes in Jesus Christ, this day or today, when you read the book of Leviticus, and when you come across all these rituals, all that it tells us is we learn and we relate, and it gives us the perspective that these rituals were they were preparation to bring the Messiah. And also, there's priesthood. As I said, you will read about priesthood. So when you come across priesthood, what are you going to do with it? With priesthood, Jesus came and he became a priest forever. But not only Jesus, when he came and when he entered the office of priesthood, the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, says that he also made everyone who believes in him a priest. So when you see priesthood in the book of Leviticus, it also tells you that that was a shadow of who we were to become today through Jesus Christ. So when Jesus Christ came, he made us priests. And now you know what it means to be a priest. So now it's not only, it's no longer the nation of Israel that stands before, as mediators between God and mankind, or between heaven and earth. The priesthood now is being given to every person who believes in Jesus Christ. As long as you believe in Jesus Christ, you are now a mediator between God and mankind. You are now the connector between heaven and earth. You are now a conduit of the presence of God. And last, we have laws. So when you come across laws in the book of Leviticus, what are you supposed to do? Do you need to apply them today? Are they still relevant? This is what I learned. These laws, as you read, there's a lot of them. But when Jesus came, he summarized them in two main parts. He said, the whole law of or the Torah and the prophets can be summarized into two things. One, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and with all your strength. And second, love your neighbor as yourself. So, and Paul explains more in the book of Galatians when he says that people who have the fruit of the Spirit, or people who walk in, who are being led by the Spirit of God, are no longer under the law, are no longer obligated to follow the law, because the Spirit of God within them has fulfilled, Jesus Christ has fulfilled the law on our behalf. So when we live and walk with the Spirit of God, he is the presence of Jesus himself. And when we walk with him and we follow his lead, the law is being fulfilled in us, or the law has already been fulfilled in us. So that's why he says we are no longer under the law. So the only law that guides us today is the law of the Spirit. Now, I know this has stirred a lot of controversy, and a lot of people have ran into, I would say, some error. Some people try to observe the regulations that were put in the book of Leviticus, but these regulations were meant, their main purpose was for the Israelites to bring the Messiah. After Jesus came, all of them, their mission was accomplished. So now the only law and the only ritual and the priesthood that we have is Jesus Christ. Whoever believes in him, he has observed all the rituals. He is a priest, and all the laws have been accomplished or fulfilled in him through Jesus. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. Thank you very much for your time and for listening. And I'm looking forward to having you to our next lesson as we explore the book of Numbers. Until next time, God bless you.